Podcast with Phil Zito, episode 420. Hey, folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to this episode of the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about how to evaluate and choose the building automation system for your building. So this is continuing in our facility managers series, and we are going to be looking at a bunch of different resources today. I'm actually going to be sharing my screen. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, definitely go to podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/420 after the fact, about an hour from right now, and you'll be able to see the recording on YouTube. For those of you who are watching live, welcome. Like I said, I'm going to be sharing some things on the screen. As always, if you are looking for the resources mentioned in this podcast, you can go and find them at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com. And for this specific episode, podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/420. I do want to point out that there is a chat feature on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I will interact back with you. If you have questions, by all means, please do not hesitate to ask those questions. I really enjoy interacting with you. So let's dive in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of summarize the key features to look for in a building automation system. Then we're going to look at a guide I wrote a couple of years ago called How to Evaluate a Building Automation System, which includes specification language and evaluation criteria. The good news, bad news. Good news is building automation systems really haven't changed substantially much over the past decade, despite what you may be hearing. Pretty much most of the changes are either at the server layer or they are the enablement of IP controllers. Beyond that, it's pretty much the same old stuff we've been doing for the past decade, which is great because it makes it easy to evaluate. But at the same time, if you don't know what features are available, you can find yourself kind of struggling. So let's talk about features. Let's dive in. The key features that I recommend you look for in building automation systems are in this specific order. And some of you are going to disagree with this order. Some of you are going to agree. It's totally fine. If you've got a counterpoint, there's a chat section right there. Chat me up, let me know, and be like, Phil, I totally disagree. And I'd love to hear your perspective. So the features I recommend in this specific order are, first, a user-friendly interface. If you cannot utilize your building automation system, it doesn't matter if it's cyber secure, it doesn't matter if it's integrated, it doesn't matter if it helps you with these analytics or Guideline 36 implemented programs. None of that matters if you never use it. And the biggest barrier to use, in my experience, is user-friendly interfaces. So that's number one criteria whenever I look at a building automation system. The good thing is, besides for some minor feature tweaks, most building automation interfaces nowadays are pretty modular, and there's a lot of third-party graphics and UI folks that you can lean on, user interface, folks that you can lean on to make your system work for you. This kind of ties back to laying out our BAS criteria that we laid out in the previous episode 419. Lay out your criteria, define your criteria, and then from that criteria, you will be able to measure these things. The next thing I highly recommend is energy management and efficiency. And I know some of you are already screaming, Phil, why haven't you talked about cybersecurity yet? I promise you we'll get to that. And hopefully you see my reasoning why that is not the primary thing you should be looking at. So energy management and efficiency are critical. Your ability to visualize your energy use intensity, your ability to control load shed, demand, load limit, implement Guideline 36 sequences, etc. In my opinion, if you're upgrading your building automation system or purchasing a new one, should be top of your list. Sure, if you live in maybe Alabama, Mississippi, where energy is still relatively cheap and regulation is low, then energy management and efficiency may not be the primary point. That being said, if you live anywhere else in the world, usually energy management and efficiency are key factors, either for cost of utilities, local or state regulation, building codes, just the governance and expectations of owner operators. These are all things that are driving folks to have to focus in on energy management and efficiency. Excuse me. If you're in the EU, if you're in New York, if you're in Washington, D.C., if you're in Denver, if you're in California, Washington, Oregon, all of these areas have energy use intensity targets, net zero or near net zero aggressive goals, building codes, reporting measurement requirements with penalties if you don't report. So this is why I say that this should be factor number 2. You really want to enable the ability to go and actually implement or have the ability rather. Sorry, I get distracted by Slack. I need to turn my phone upside down. Slack is dangerous, folks. It makes you distracted. Like I said, it gives the energy management and efficiency gives you the ability to be flexible if you have some sort of regulation pop up that you are required to meet. Now, I will say that while I view this as the second most important criteria of a BAS, I haven't got to the contractor side of things, but of a specific BAS, I will say that this is a criteria that you can meet with third-party add-on solutions that most OEMs provide, original equipment manufacturers provide. The third thing I want to talk about is going to be integration with existing systems. Now, if you are a new build, new construction on a campus with no existing building automation systems, this isn't such a big deal. Most of the folks who listen to this podcast based on the demographics on the owner side are not of that group. Most of you who are listening on the owner's side run campuses, run multi-building facilities and campuses for your environments. That is why I rank this number 3. Having the ability to easily integrate with existing systems is going to be key to expanding your building automation system so that whatever investment you make can leverage the investments you've already made. The fourth criteria is going to be around occupant comfort and productivity. Yes, I've not gotten to cybersecurity yet. I know that's shocking to a lot of folks. Occupant comfort and productivity, at the end of the day, you've heard me rally again and again and again and again that occupant comfort and productivity should be one of the main focuses of a facility. What is the use case that your facility is used for? Hospitals, K through 12, higher ed, local government, et cetera, transportation. Your building automation system should support the use cases and how those facilities make money, and ultimately should make the space comfortable for the occupants. Last and not least is security. Why did I include cybersecurity last? It's because I am a very strong advocate that cybersecurity should be cascaded from the organization down to the facility group. Are there baseline things that a building automation system should do, like HTTPS over TLS? Yes, of course. Should they have a patching process? Definitely. Should they have a secure development lifecycle in the production of their BAS software? Yes, absolutely. These are things that, by and large, are considered by default for most building automation systems. Now, I will say that implementing these things is a whole nother world. So the building automation systems, by and large, that are entering the market right now support most of the required cybersecurity requirements. The authentication of users, the logging of users, the secure transmission of data via HTTPS from the server to the UI, stuff like that. That being said, all of this comes down to implementation. So while a good chunk of it falls on the contractor, in my opinion, I would rather have a medium secured building automation system with a highly secured and competent building IT staff than a highly secured building automation system with a medium to low competent IT staff. The reason why is a lot of your attack vectors, the machines, the networks, etc., are protected or should be protected by IT cybersecurity appliances, which we've talked to ad nauseum in, I think it was like episodes 409, 410. So you go back and listen to those. All right, let's, excuse me, share my screen. By the way, I'm getting an air conditioner with a humidifier put into this office. So hopefully that should raise it above the 15% relative humidity it is right now. All right, share screen, window, Chrome tab. There we go. Let me pop this guy out right here. Show on screen. All right. So if you haven't visited our website ever, I highly encourage you to. We have a ton of guides that are freely available for anyone to read. They're not behind a paywall. They're not behind an opt-in wall. You literally just go to guides.smartbuildingsacademy.com, and there's just a ton of them there. This is one that I don't believe gets as much visibility as it should. And this is our framework for evaluating building automation systems. It goes over all the typical things you'd expect to see: openness, graphics, alarming, trends, configuration tools, controls architecture, support infrastructure, training, legacy support, supported protocols. Here's how I advise you to use this. And, we'll dive into each one of these at a pretty high level. I'll give you an explanation of the criteria, and, you can refer to this. As a matter of fact, I will post it in the chat here. You can refer to that at a later date. Don't click on it right now because it will cause you to go and switch off of this, which wouldn't be preferred. So the criteria: openness. This is the one that a lot of folks talk about. There's so many articles written about. I would like to say, toot my own horn just a little bit. If you start to read a lot of the articles on openness, they'll look oddly familiar to my guide, which is totally cool because, we're all about educating the masses, but you'll see that a lot of what is used is oddly familiar to what you'll see in this guide. But open procurement, open protocol, open APIs, and open software. These are all things that you should be looking at. In reality, the two things you really should be looking at are open procurement and open protocol. So if I'm a facility manager, I want to think two things. I want to think, where can I get my parts and pieces from if my contractor ticks me off? Like, is there only one place I can get it from, and they're just low bidding the job just to gouge me after the fact? And then I also want to think, how can this system talk to other systems? Hence, open procurement and open protocol. Open APIs and open software are awesome. There's almost no one with open software. There's a handful of companies, but they don't really have market share. There's a couple companies that have open APIs, but that's more like it requires a high level of expertise to work with an API. Open procurement essentially is you're going and being able to provide or purchase your controllers, your software, whatever, from multiple suppliers and distributors. Open protocol, this is the actual ways in which the systems communicate, and you want the ability to be able to go and grab data from other systems without, having to purchase license keys, without having to purchase points, etc. So Open Protocol is like truly open. You can just discover devices and map them in. And you'll see that as you go through the guide, which I'm not going to take you through right in very deep detail, but we provide some RFQ language and we provide ranking structures for you. So if you want to add something to your RFQ or RFP and you want to have a somewhat agnostic assessment, this isn't vendor specific, but it's what I believe should be the ranking. So take this, adjust it as you will. Same thing with Open Protocol. Let's move on. Graphics. Like I said, user interfaces. When I wrote this, at the time I wrote this, I was very much integration focused. Now that I'm doing a lot more work and our organization is doing a lot more work with facility groups, I will say that graphics has become my number one priority. Graphics, we talk about a couple things, right? And I give you some examples, what is HTML, graphics configuration software, graphics libraries, etc. My goal here is for whatever you do, make sure that you have some form of graphics standard. And, you'll see there's a link right there on how to do it. I do realize some of these links still refer back to old sites and old things. So we'll be updating that, but definitely still utilize this guide. And the graphics, what I recommend is that you have the ability to change your graphics. You add a VAV box, replace a VAV box, do a tenant finish out. You should have the ability to change that if you are so inclined. You should have some graphics available to you, and your graphics should be responsive, meaning that you can grab your phone, you can bring them up. And for those of you who are listening, I just showed a picture of my phone. But you can bring up your phone and you'll be able to go and actually look at the graphics and it'll respond, hence the term responsive, to the size of the screen. Some of these I'm going to skip over just for time's sake. I'm not going to go through each one. You're fully capable of going to this link, which I'll have available at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/420. Configuration tools. This is something that at the time I wrote this guide was not such a big deal. But with the increase in contractor pricing, inflation, unpredictable cost pressures that a lot of facility managers are finding themselves under, they go and create a budget during budgetary cycle last July for a hospital. They get right now to April only to realize that they burned through their operational costs, last November due to inflation, due to rise in fuel costs, etc. And so they find themselves like, how can I self-support? Maybe the contractors in their area have less people available and can't get to the site when they're needed. Maybe their operational costs have increased substantially and they need to be able to self-support. So configuration tools is where it's at, folks. One thing, please, if you do anything from this podcast, anything at all, when you go and you develop a standard or you do an RFP, RFQ, or you do some sort of engagement for a building automation system, please put in the spec or whatever document you use that the contractor is required to provide you open administrative licenses to the software for whatever software is required for the building automation system you purchase. And here's why. If you ever want to go and utilize a different contractor, you've got the software. If you ever want to do something yourself, you've got the software. I'm telling you, if you don't get that in and you don't make sure that you do have that prior to project closeout, then you're going to find yourself in a situation where you may have systems that are vendor locked. You may have systems where you don't have the programming files. You don't have the setting files. And anytime you need to make a change, you don't have the software and you don't have the programming files from which to base those changes on. So I really recommend you build that in. And you can see I kind of create that criteria here. I'm going to skip over controls architecture, although that is important. We have talked about that quite a bit in past podcast episodes. Support infrastructure. This is huge. So I hinted a little bit earlier in the episode that I wasn't talking about contractors. I was just talking about BAS capabilities. If you were to ask me, if you were at ABC Hospital or ABC Airport and you came up to me and you said, Phil, what is the most important thing for me to consider when I purchase a new building automation system? I would say it is not the building automation system. I would say it is the support infrastructure that is going to be providing that building automation system. So what does that look like? That looks like an organization that can support you, especially if you're a regional organization, like you're a regional hospital, regional university system, etc. You want an organization that can bring consistent design principles because it should, in theory, reduce your costs. You should get consistent service. You also want to look at who is working on your system. And you want to look at it from three perspectives: sales, construction, service. Who is selling your system? Do they have experience with your vertical market? Have they worked with your kind of building before? How are they at interpreting, the guides and the plans and specifications? And then who's doing the estimating? You want ideally a system that is designed properly. From there, who's the construction team? Have they worked with this kind of project before? What is their backlog? Are you going to have a random person floating out to your job every once in a while? Or are you going to have a dedicated project manager and a dedicated technician who's going to oversee it from start to finish? And then finally, support. Who's going to support you? Who is going to be there making sure that you go and have that interface during that first 1 to 3 years where, quite honestly, buildings become super, if you study the ASHRAE studies, or if you read the ASHRAE studies, buildings become super inefficient after year 2 to 3. It's like 18 months, if I remember correctly. That's when building automation systems start to degrade via overrides, via sensor calibration issues, PID tuning issues, etc. And you want to make sure you have someone there to guide you through that so you don't find yourself in for a world of hurt. We're not going to hammer training, although training is huge and is definitely something we do for our facility customer partners. I will tell you, it is really important, so much so that, we're 13,000 plus students now. Training is really important. Let's move on. Legacy support. This is something that our systems are moving fast. I've never seen our building automation systems move so fast from a product perspective. While the capabilities aren't changing dramatically, still program the same way by and large. You still do graphics the same way by and large. You still deploy systems the same way by and large. I will tell you that the life cycle of products is becoming quicker and quicker. So whereas we had product lines that maybe lasted 20 years, well, it's foreseeable based on the conversations I've had in the future for us to be seeing product life cycles of 5 to 10 years. And what does that mean? Well, that means that you need some sort of pathway to support a building, a legacy control system in a building, because legacy may now mean 5 to 10 years, where in the past it meant 20 years. And here's why that's an issue. If you look at the ASHRAE guidelines on equipment life cycle, the average equipment life cycle is somewhere between 15 to 30 years, depending on the piece of equipment. With that being said, the average control system used to match that, right? 10 to 20 years. Nowadays, we see control systems that really are starting to have massive changes to their architecture or software. You got IP controls, you've got BACnet SC coming down the pipe, which will, as far as I could tell, require firmware updates and potentially controller replacements for legacy products. So having legacy support, this is really important. You want to understand, especially if this is a large purchase. I don't recommend this for like a $20,000 job. But if you are investing in a $5 million control job, you darn well better ask, what is that manufacturer's plan for supporting legacy products through the life cycle of the building? Let's continue right along and let's take a look. I'm going to stop sharing here, pop back up here, and I'm going to pause real quickly just to see what, if any, questions we have. And then I'm going to kind of wrap us up with a summary here. So let me see. Where do we have questions? All right. Perfect. It's good to see all of you in here today. Let's go to chat. Not seeing anything. All right. So I mentioned how we go and we rank, and I highly recommend you utilize that web link that I pointed you to for going and being able to establish a quantifiable criteria that you then evaluate people against. Once you've done that, though, then it is a matter of adding up that score, force ranking that. And what I tend to say is that you should have two rankings. Ranking number one should be the actual support capabilities from sales, pre-sales, construction, and service of the contractor or OEM that is executing the work. That should be bucket one. Score number two should be the product bucket. And that is another thing that I recommend you score. And then I place a higher weight personally on the delivery. So the delivery and the support. Although if you are like University of Minnesota, who has a tremendous, or maybe it was Michigan, it's one of the two. They have a tremendous group from a support perspective internally. So maybe they don't weight support as heavily as someone else may. Maybe they weight distribution more heavily. Andrew has two questions. He says, what about annual fees and how to best capture that? Very valid point. So a lot of manufacturers these days are moving to a cost plus license. So you pay a base cost plus a yearly license. This started in the IT world where you would buy your switch, you would buy your base license, and then you had a maintenance fee for it. And there's two buckets that I want to describe this in. There is a continual support or a continue to use. Majority of product providers are continual support models, meaning that you buy the license to use as part of your initial capital purchase. And then your upgrade fees, your upgrade costs are going to be that license cost. There are some people who you buy a license to use and you pay that each year, although that is rare. So how do you find out these costs? Well, you just ask quite simply, what is the licensing cost for? And pay attention here, the software and the appliance and the integration. Those are typically the three buckets. You will have the software, which is both the configuration software as well as the server software itself. There's typically a license cost associated to that on the capital side, and sometimes there's an annual maintenance license. Then you have the appliance, so your supervisory device, your field controller, et cetera. They may have a license, both an initial cost license and a support. And then you have any integrations. So maybe you pay per BACnet point. Maybe you pay per data point. So you just simply need to know to ask for those costs and or reflect those costs. So there's kind of two buckets, right? If I'm talking to the facility directors, managers, and evaluators, I would say that I want my contractor to disclose purchase cost and annual support cost, ideally for a 5 to 10 year life cycle, so that I can predict my ongoing O&M costs as well as my initial capital cost. If I'm in a competitive bid scenario and I believe my licensing structure or my fee structure is significantly more competitive than the people I'm bidding against, then what I want to do is maybe through a request for clarification, be like, how would you like us to present our capital one-time cost and our licensing costs? And how many years would you like us to extrapolate our licensing cost? Now, this may come back to bite you in the butt, because what may happen is you may disclose those costs, but no one else may, and it may put you in what is perceived as a less competitive situation or position. On the flip side, you may force all of the competitors now to disclose those initial purchase costs and their lifecycle costs. And you may now look more attractive because maybe you work for a manufacturer that has a low or non-existent licensing rate. And so that can favorably position you if cost is the only deciding factor. So, Andrew, I hope that answers your questions. Those were good questions. Thank you for asking. Let's see what other questions we have from people. All right. Looks like we're good to go. So, folks, we do this every Monday, Wednesday, and almost every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Try to do it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Sometimes I miss a couple days. With our marketing manager starting today, we should definitely be getting much more predictable. So, thank you so much for being here. Like always, if you found this valuable, here's what you can do for us. Please, if you're on LinkedIn, just repost this. Share it with your thoughts on it. Just share this post. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, go to all. If you're on Facebook, like and comment. And if you're on iTunes or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much, and I will see you all on Wednesday. You all take care.